There's an old saying that says, when things get tough, the tough get going. Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today. Things in Israel may be seeming to be a little bit tough. What in the world is going on the other side? In the enemy territory? Well, that's what we're about to dig into. And hey guys, it's not time to back out. It's time to get in the game. Stay tuned for more right here at the Israel Guys.
Welcome to the Israel Guys, where we believe that in a world of fake news, you should connect to the true and authentic stories of Israel. Guys, hit subscribe right now and make sure you ring that bell so you don't miss out on any of our content. By the way, we have a daily 15-minute podcast Monday through Friday. It's called the Israel Guys Daily, and it keeps you informed about what's happening, boots on the ground here in the heartland of Israel. Just search on your favorite podcast platform for the Israel Guys. The Israel Guys Daily will keep you up to date and informed about what's going on here in Israel. Make sure you subscribe, guys. It's kind of a violent time, and we really hate to say that, but you know, there is a positive silver lining, and we're going to bring that out today. And also, really the need for strong people, especially Bible-believing Christians, to stand with Israel more than ever. Now is not a time to be afraid. It might be a lot of things happening, but it's not a time to be afraid. You know, just at the bottom of the mountain where we're sitting in the studio right now, there was an attempted terrorist attack yesterday, but thankfully, the enemies of the Jewish people and the enemies of God did not win. The terrorist was neutralized before he could do any harm whatsoever. And that's the story that we're going to bring you because, yes, there are casualties. Yes, there is tragedies. There are people that are killed, people that are hurt. But God is watching over his people. You know, we are Bible-believing Christians, and we believe that God's hand and is still on this land, and his promises that he will stand with these people is true. A lot of terrorist attacks happening over the last couple of months. We hesitate to say the word Intifada, but some people are using that. The Arabs themselves are not using it, but that's because they don't really, they want to do it. They want to keep committing acts of violence without rising the irony of Israel and their military and also the international community, because they know Intifada, that the international community is on their side.
By saying Intifada, that would kind of take away from their power to continue to harm Israel, because the international community doesn't, thankfully enough, they don't really like the sound of Intifada. Mm-hmm. They want to tone things down. So as long as they are raising hell and killing and I'm telling you, it's going out of hand here. As long as they don't call it Intifada, the world kind of that keeps it toned down. They don't want to hear about it. Guys, I want to frame this quickly before we dive into this, because we're going to talk about what the enemy's doing. We're going to talk about what their tactics are, how they're doing it, and I want you to know that we're talking about this because you need to know what the enemy is doing in order to combat it, in order to fight against it. I think about Zionists throughout history. Luke, one of my favorite things to do is know the stories, know history. Who got in the game in 1948, when Israel is on the brink of disaster? It turned into a miraculous event where the state of Israel is born. Well, people got in the game that believed in God and believed in Zionism, believed in the birth of a nation and a home for Jewish people to be established here in the heartland of Israel. They came to establish Israel as a country, a safe place for Jews. Christians came, non-Jews came, and joined the Jewish people in this incredible fight for what was right. And that's what I want to frame this. You know what? They knew what the enemy was doing. They knew that it was going to be dangerous, but they did it because it was an act of faith. They were an act of truth. They wanted to do what was right in their time, and they did it. And that's why the books are written about them, because they did what was right in their time. Guys, now is a time in Israel that maybe, the tour agencies are calling, you sure we should go? We're getting calls, you sure we should go? And I'm telling you, absolutely go. You have a mandate to do it. You got to stand with Israel, and when Israel is in need, of course. I've been here when things were much more out of hand than it is right now, and I'm telling you, you want to stand with the Jewish people. They're here. They're living here. They're not moving out. They're here. You want to stand with the Jewish people in their time of need, now's the time. You want to make a difference? You want to be a real Zionist? You want to really show who you are? Come when Israel needs you. Now we're going to tell you what the enemy's doing so you can fight it, because it needs to be fought.
I want to start with the story of a hero, because speaking of tragedies, a real true hero of Israel was tragically killed in Jenin last week, about a day after the operation where the Al Jazeera reporter was tragically accidentally, we can't even say accidentally because it could have been intentional on the part of
Likely
the
intentional, I'd say.
Palestinian terrorists
Yeah.
who knew that they could blame her death on Israel. But anyways, about a day after that operation, the IDF goes into Jenin in another anti-terrorism operation, and Sergeant Major Noam Raz, who's from a elite anti-terrorism unit called Yamam, was tragically tragically shot and then died very shortly thereafter. He was a longtime commando in a very, very elite anti-terrorism unit in the IDF. Served as a medic, combat soldier, and very often has a very long career in the IDF, risked his life to save many other people. And not only that, but he was a founding member and lived in one of the Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria, specifically in the Benjamin region of Shamron, close to Shiloh, in a town called Kedah, and tragically leaves behind a wife and 6 children. The head of the Benjamin Regional Council, Israel Gantz, had this to say about Noam Raz. He said, quote, "We were privileged to live alongside a brave family man, a man of Torah, a modest hero." And he was evidently a hero and very well loved because at least 2,000 people turned out alongside the road in a procession to keep him in memory and to show their support for him and his family and their thanks and their gratitude for giving his life for the land and the people of Israel. That's not the only thing happening. I noticed there seems to be a trend with violent funerals. You know, funerals are not supposed to be violent. They're supposed to be quiet affairs, supposed to be a time for the family to mourn. Well, you heard about the violent funeral of Shireen Abu Akleh, the Al Jazeera journalist that was killed last week. If you want to know what actually happened with that story, go watch the previous video on our channel. Did a special this past Sunday on the actual story, not what you're going to hear in the news. But there's a second violent funeral that took place just this week because there was an Arab who was throwing rocks and being violent on the Temple Mount. The police tried to capture him, to arrest him, and no, they didn't kill him, but he jumped off of something or fell off of something very high, was injured very badly, was taken to the hospital, and unfortunately in the hospital he passed away. But when his family was informed of his death, they decided the best way to mourn their son was just to wreak havoc in the hospital, and I'm talking like an all-out riot inside the hospital, beating medical staff, tearing apart the hallways, tipping over carts, smashing medical equipment. The police and security guards had to be called in to finally restore order. But that wasn't the last of it, because when his funeral actually took place, there was more violent riots and violence that broke out all across Jerusalem. It seems like the enemies of God, like they think that they can turn anyone who is killed or who dies into an international incident with the media all on their side. Yeah. And so they don't give families the space to mourn as they should. They don't, they're not mourning their own people. They're using this as targeted specific events to be able to plead their case against Israel. And they know that they have the entire international community with them.
Luke, it's propaganda at its finest. They're taking over a situation that they know they can get community involvement. They know that they can pull together people around a narrative that unfortunately is completely false. For instance, the Al Jazeera reporter that was killed, they totally brought a new narrative. That was not, a lot of that was not true, right? Mm-hmm. They rewrote the story. Even she was a Christian, right? And they try to make her into this radical Islamist lady, right? And then they steal her coffin. I mean, a crazy story that the family was actually really horrified, her family. Yeah. They were not supporting this. But they're taking these moments, they're taking these deaths, a culture of death, remember that? Islamic culture, death. They're taking that momentum of death that they think is momentum, and they're grabbing hold of that and creating riots out of it. They know they can get attention. They know they can get international sympathy as well, especially when they can blame these deaths on Israel somehow, which I can guarantee you. And as you've already seen in the news, that's what's happening. They're building momentum off of death. They're trying to make the world think that this is all Israel causing death. Opposite is actually true. Israel's trying to restore calm and peace when those people are taking these many times innocent people that have died for who knows what reasons, and they're really taking over. They're grabbing hold of these events, whatever it is, funeral, and making it into a PA, Palestinian Authority, political event. Mm-hmm. This is what's actually happening on the ground here.
It's not it's not only just Palestinian Arabs that live in Judea and Samaria or the Gaza Strip. It's also Israeli Arabs. And when I say Israeli Arabs, I mean full citizens of the state of Israel with full and equal rights, right alongside the Jewish people and everyone else that lives here in Israel. We're going to talk a little bit about those Arabs and not only their support for violence and terrorism, but their actions as well. Yeah. If you remember the riots that happened during the war with Gaza last May 2021, there was riots in multiple Israeli cities, talking about Lod, talking about Jaffa, Tel Aviv, Yafo. And these riots were very, very violent. I mean, cars smashed, cars set on fire, buildings broken into, Jewish people beat up, several people killed in these riots. Well, the IDF is predicting that if another war were to break out with Hamas or with Gaza, that the violence and the rioting would be twofold what it was last year. So right now they're in the midst of preparing for scenarios where they can stop violence and rioting before it actually takes off and gets bad. But this is Israel we're talking about. We're talking about Israeli citizens that live right alongside their Jewish neighbors. There's actually violence and a lot of threats happening right now as well on the public bus system in Israel. There's several different incidents of Arabs that have been boarding buses in Israel proper, as we like to call it, and then threatening the passengers, one of them even threatening them with a knife. There's two different stories. Zalman Stub was traveling from Eilat to Jerusalem last week and described his experience.
Luke, can we say that again? He was traveling from Eilat to Jerusalem?
Which is the very, very southern tip of Israel, right next to the Red Sea, back up to Jerusalem. So we're talking about in the state.
Totally.
Israel proper.
No political argument against Israel being in that, Jews being in that area, okay? That's supposed to be a safe zone for Jews.
Okay, so this story it gets worse than this story, though. 5 Arabs get on, they get in the back of the bus, they turn on really loud music, they light up cigarettes, which is absolutely not allowed. So the smell starts going all over the bus, the cigarette smoke, people turn around, people try to talk to them, and they just shout in their faces and tell them to sit down. One guy turned around and asked him to turn down the volume of their music, but they just laughed in his face. And then anytime anyone tried to talk to them, they yelled at him, screamed at him, told him if they knew it was good for them to turn around and sit down in their seats. And everybody realized. And one of them even kicked a guy right in the back of his chair, the Zalman Stub, who described his experiences. And everybody knew that if they tried to do anything, they would be in real danger. These are 5 guys on the bus together. But that's not, it gets back. Worse than that. Oh, I want to read one quote from Zalman, because he said, quote, "I was left with a bitter taste in my mouth. We, the Jews, have become impotent, and the war is everywhere. And Sheikh Jarrah and Sheikh, and that's... Sorry, it's in Sheikh, that's not Jarrah, when talking about in Jerusalem. Not at Sheikh and not anywhere with any Arab orientation. It's just everywhere." He's saying there's no place in Israel that's safe. Israel is supposed to be the safe home for the Jewish people in the world, and they're not feeling safe on the public bus system. Another incident, someone traveling from Beit Shemesh to Jerusalem, again, Israel proper. We boarded a bus yesterday, and 2 young Arabs sat at the back of the bus. One of the travelers... From the moment we boarded the bus, the Arabs turned on Arabic music, smoked cigarettes, and began to laugh wildly, loud voices. And then suddenly, with no one even complaining or saying a word, one of them gets up and pulls out a penknife and walks back and forth up and down the aisle, making signs as if he was slaughtering someone. And when they called the police, guess what happened? Police said they couldn't come because the Arabs had not stabbed anyone, because they hadn't killed anybody or tried to. So they couldn't come. That's the state of the situation, unfortunately. It's just horrible. Defense Minister Benny Gantz has a very ominous warning, and that is that you know there's problems with the Gaza Strip. You know there's problems with the Palestinian Authority in Judea and Samaria, what the world calls the West Bank. But a lot of people don't know that there's a big problem with the Arabs in the Negev, in Israel's desert. But not only that, but also problems in Israel's north. Defense Minister Benny Gantz is warning in a recent meeting with his party that he received from an unnamed Arab source messages threatening that they would take over Israel. And I'll read part of that message.
Luke, I want to say, when you say north, we're talking about the Galilee.
The Galilee.
We're talking about, if you've
been on a tour to Israel, you've been to the Galilee.
Galilee. Big, and we're not talking about Judea and Samaria zones. We were going to bring up something. This is very vital for you guys to understand. You're the pro-Israel guys. You need to understand the battle here, and we've got to get engaged. Listen to this.
So the message says, quote, continue to curse. You have no chance against Allah. Slowly, slowly, we're eating away at your country. We have land in the Negev. That is the size of Gush Dan, central Israel, which is filled with tin shacks with little Bedouin children. What are you going to do? This is Palestinian land, essentially. And the moment a single tractor comes, we'll use the leftist organizations such as Peace Now and B'Tselem, which will turn to the real ruler of the country, Supreme Court, to issue a cease and desist order. Now, by the way, if you had any doubts about who Peace Now and B'Tselem really were, the Palestinians know that they can use these organizations to get whatever they want from a liberal Supreme Court system here in Israel. Going on, quote, the Galilee, with Allah's help, will be ours soon. We are buying a dunam, which is a quarter acre, for 50,000 shekels from the administration. You think that's expensive? Well, the Jews pay 1.15 million shekels per dunam. Already, we are 85% of the Galilee's population, and we are taking over at a fast pace, building homes in every corner without permits. Why? Who will bother us? The Jews who live in the Galilee? They're all running to the center of the country. Why? They suffer from harassment, violence on the roads, extortion, shootings, thefts, and bribery. So there you have it, straight from the Arabs themselves, admitting to all this, admitting that they have Peace Now and B'Tselem, leftist organizations here in Israel, in their back pocket, admitting that they know they can send these organizations to the Supreme Court, admitting that they know they harass and bother the Jewish people with harassment and violence and extortion, shooting, thefts, bribery, straight from them, and that they're trying to take now. Never fear, they will not take over the Galilee. They will not take over the Negev because this is the land of Israel. And one thing about building homes, yes, it is absolutely true. They're building homes by the thousands and thousands, illegal homes in Judea and Samaria and in Israel proper. They're building homes, but they don't have enough people to put in all those homes, okay? I don't know the exact situation in the Galilee or the Negev, but we do know that from experience here. But according to Defense Minister Benny Gantz, this is a warning light. This is what of actually happening on the ground.
Look,
and
he read this in a session with the defense minister at a party meeting. He was reading this text. So you may not think that this is a big threat. Who knows who the Arab is? It says an unknown source. Who knows the Arab that actually sent him this text? But this is
it's a warning light. Yeah, that basically he's saying we need to invest in the north of Israel. We need to invest in the south of Israel. Benny Gantz says, quote, if we do not invest in the Galilee and the Negev, then we will, in essence, end up with an agreement to divide the country. The ones who wrote the WhatsApp are right. The future of the Jewish state may end up being between Gadara and Hadera, basically the coastal line of Israel, the coastal region there.
Luke, I have major problems with that statement, and I have major problems right now with the defense minister of Israel, who I'm now placing in a not just left, but I'm going far left to have the audacity to say that the WhatsApp could be correct. We might be now just, the Jewish state may just have to, out of necessity, the Arabs might kick us out of all the other lands. We might have to just go down to the coastline now. I mean, 85% of Jews live there anyway. We might should just pull out of everything, not just Judea and Samaria, but
to be clear, that's not what he's saying.
He's saying he might be right.
No. He's saying that this is a warning that we need to invest in the north and the south.
Yeah,
like he's warning Israel. So he doesn't agree with that.
Although he's saying the future of the Jewish state may end up being between.
Which is his warning, right.
I'm telling you, that's
he's not
crazy.
For that. He's not for that.
Yeah, but nobody else would even ever state that. That's
but it's
outrageous.
A warning, and it's a fair warning that, yes, it is true. Israel needs to heavily invest, not just in the coastal region. And it is true that most of Israel's population lives in that coastal region.
Which Benny Gantz is for pulling settlements out. He's far left. He says one thing and does another. So I'm not fully on with you.
I don't agree. Don't agree.
I'm Benny Gantz.
I don't think he's for. He's not actually for pulling settlements.
But those out there that are with me,
right wing. He's not right wing, but he's definitely not far
Luke,
left.
We're going to end this war in the chat box below. You guys can go with me. I agree
with his warning, though, that Israel needs to pay attention. They need to pay attention to all of Israel, not just certain parts of Israel.
But the audacity to say that Israel could be just the coastline, that I get that he's saying this could be a threat, but no, we've got to answer this like major, big time. There's no,
and that's what he's saying. That's exactly what he's saying.
We've got to answer this, and we've got to. This is the call of duty right now for every Christian Zionist listening. Every Zionist around the globe is no, absolutely not. That could never happen. We've got to engage. Luke, the Arabs are also attacking in many other ways. There's lots of symbolism going on in the Arab communities right now.
Well, and this comes from Palestinians and Israeli Arabs. So you got Israeli Arabs. This is where they come together. Okay, right here, this story. Palestinian store owners, specifically after an attack in Bnei Brak, which is close to Tel Aviv, about a little over a month ago, where 5 people were shot dead with an M16 rifle. Somebody had the bright idea to make a T-shirt and to make merchandise with an M16 rifle on it. And guess what? It was so popular. Only one store owner that's selling these said that in 10 days he sold 12,000 shirts or pants that have the print on them. And this merch is specifically advocating and promoting the death of Israelis because it's promoting that murder of 5 people in Bnei Brak where the terrorists used an M16 rifle. And he said it was so popular that he ordered 12,000 more. And guess what? It's not just Palestinians that are buying these. According to an Israeli news site, N12 reports that some Israeli Arabs are also wearing the same M16 T-shirts. In well-known Israeli supermarkets, students and young children wearing the shirt on which the weapon is printed. That's the state of, so it's not just Palestinian Arabs, it's also Israeli Arabs that have this true belief of hatred and violence towards the Jewish people in the state of Israel.
I've seen some of the shirts myself. Actually, driving through the Arab village down here, I looked into the clothes store. Boom, there it was, right there. Just pushing and promoting killing Jews. Let's just say it like it is.
Yeah.
That's the culture here. Don't stand up for 1 second. We got to call it out. This is what it is. It's Arab propaganda to kill Jews. We're in the state of Israel, the state that is supposed to be a safe place for Jews to live and to be and to thrive and prosper, and that is being attacked. Let that be a big red light warning to you. If you're wherever you are in the world, that freedom the Jews have to live in the state of Israel and be free and not fear death and destruction and annihilation is being threatened. It's being threatened by an Islamic takeover that is happening. You don't believe me? It's happening, and it's time that we stand up and fight it with everything we've got. Luke, as we start to close here, there's this story I want to tell you guys. When the Jewish state was being established in 1948, there was a German man who just thought, and everybody's asking, well, what can I do? You know what? I was talking to a good friend. He told me this story the other day. Nati Ram, great friend, local here. He said, this is what you need to do. You do whatever you can do. The German in Germany after the war that was pro-Israel. I mean, there was still pro-Israel people there. Not every German was a Nazi, right? He had opportunity to smuggle 5 warplanes into Israel. He did that, and guess what? Those 5 warplanes were turned into the first, Air Force of Israel. Everybody, you have to do what you can do to stand with Israel, and no matter what realm, I know everybody has a different story. Everybody's got a different place. You got to understand what the enemy's doing so that you can act and be involved in the building up of this nation in the best possible way. You know your realm. You know what you're able to do. Do it. If that's coming to Israel and being involved and helping to build the farms up like we're doing right now, we're doing it on a constant basis. Come and join us, build up this land. You guys heard in the some of the rhetoric before. We don't care about the tractors. Well, I'm telling you what, this battle is a lot done with tractors as well. It's who is on the land. We need people here to get involved in the literal helping Israel hold the land of Israel. It's being taken from them. We've got to stand with Israel and support their right to hold this land.
Guys, if pro-terrorists are buying shirts with M16s on them, you guys can buy a shirt that says the opposite. It's called the Israel Guys. And you can go to theisraelguys.com, pick up one of our shirts. It can be a very bold declaration that you stand against this radical anti-Israel hatred and with the land and people of Israel. We'll put the link down in the description below if you want to pick up a shirt. It says the Israel Guys. That's a bold way. Right. That's something that you can definitely do. Guys, let us know what you think down in the comments below. Get the conversation going. Make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. And tune out the fake news. Tune into what is actually happening here in the heartland of Israel. We'll be back next week here at the Israel Guys.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Go ahead and subscribe if you like that content. We can get it to you every week right there at your fingertips. If you really liked it and have questions, anything, we love comments. Go ahead and leave us a comment as well. If you'd like to even go further, your support would be greatly appreciated. We've got lots of content, lots of ideas that we want to keep pushing out there. If you want to support, you can go to our Patreon page or check us out at theisraelguys.com.